cheating wife was waiting to mock her poor husband. On divorce day, but his arrival shocked everyone. On the morning she planned to humiliate her husband in court, Lila Carmichael dressed for triumph. Diamond earrings, white suit, the smile of a woman certain she'd won. For 6 months, she had told everyone he was broke, pathetic, finished. But as she waited outside the courthouse, ready to watch him crawl for mercy, the low growl of an engine silenced every whisper. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom slid to the curb, and out stepped the same man she'd abandoned, calm, sharp, and richer than her imagination could ever stretch. Within that courtroom, the laughter she rehearsed turned to terror, because the man she thought she destroyed wasn't there to beg. He was there to end her illusion. The Texas heat shimmered against the marble of the Travis County Courthouse. 6 months had crawled by since Lila Carmichael filed for divorce. 6 months of gossip, salon whispers, and Instagram captions about how she'd finally freed herself from failure. Today was her victory lap. She stood at the top of the courthouse steps, in a white power suit that matched the gleam of her teeth. Her mother fanned herself beside her, pearls clicking with every flutter, and Trent Avery, her lover, her ex-husband's former partner, adjusted his gold cufflinks with the kind of smugness money buys before it's earned. "Bet he shows up late," Trent murmured. Lila laughed softly. "If he shows up at all, probably couldn't afford gas." But the sound that followed didn't belong to poverty. It was a low mechanical purr that made even the bailiffs glance toward the street. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom eased to the curb, paint gleaming like liquid glass beneath the Austin sun. The driver stepped out, opened the door, and there he was, Evan Carmichael. The man they'd all written off looked carved from another life. Tailored navy suit, watch that caught the light without trying, calm steps that owned silence. He nodded once at the security guard. "Morning, Mr. Carmichael," the guard said, like the title belonged to someone powerful. Lila's smile faltered. "He rented that," she hissed, too loud. Her mother's fan slowed. Trent's throat tightened. Evan's eyes swept across them, no anger, no smirk, just the kind of composure that makes guilt itch. He passed within arm's length, the faint scent of expensive cologne brushing the air she used to claim as hers. "Mr. Carmichael, courtroom 3A, a clerk called. "Thank you," he replied evenly and walked inside. Lila forced a laugh. He must think pretending fixes failure. But the laugh didn't land. The courthouse suddenly felt too bright, too public. As they followed, her heels clicked harder than intended. Inside, air conditioning replaced the heat, but tension stayed. Lawyers shuffled papers. Reporters checked lenses. Somewhere in the back row, a court officer whispered, "That's the startup guy who disappeared." Evan sat down quietly at his table, fingers resting on a black notebook, worn edges, a single elastic band. Lila noticed it and felt a ripple of something she couldn't name. That notebook had survived everything. She used to mock him for carrying it everywhere. The judge entered. "Court is now in session." Evan looked forward, expression unreadable. Lila leaned toward Trent. "Why is he so calm?" Trent didn't answer. He was staring at the man who once begged him for a loan, now sitting straighter, steadier, like someone who no longer owed anyone anything. Outside, the Rolls-Royce waited in sunlight, gleaming like an omen. Inside, silence stretched until even the air conditioner's hum sounded like a countdown. A year earlier, Austin had looked different through Lila's eyes, brighter, filled with promise and ambition. Back then, Evan still believed hard work could outlast cruelty. He and Trent had launched Apex Neural Systems, a small AI firm tucked between coffee shops and co-working spaces. Evan handled code and vision. Trent handled charm and investors. And for a while, it worked. Until it didn't. Funding dried up. Investors backed out. Rent doubled. Lila began calculating her future with the quiet panic of someone terrified of mediocrity. At first she brought Evan coffee and whispered that everything would be fine, but the longer he worked late nights, the more her patience thinned. One evening, he came home covered in exhaustion, holding a bag of takeout instead of roses. She barely looked up from her phone. "I told you we can't survive on dreams, Evan." "We're close," he said, voice hoarse. "I just need—" "No, I need stability." He didn't argue. He simply placed the food down, nodded once, and reached for the black notebook that lived on his desk like a quiet witness. Inside, he wrote something. Slowly, deliberately. She rolled her eyes. "You and that stupid journal." "It keeps me sane," he said, not looking up. "And one day it'll remind me who changed when money left the room." The sentence meant nothing to her then, but one day it would replay like prophecy. Weeks later, Trent began visiting more often. He came bearing expensive wine, business advice, and empathy rehearsed to perfection. When Evan was at the office, Trent sat in their kitchen, sleeves rolled up, pretending to listen to her pain. He never touched her hand. Not yet. But the attention was oxygen to someone suffocating in resentment. Then came the meeting. Evan and Trent sat across from venture capitalists who smiled too wide. "We'll fund Apex, but your CTO must step aside," the investor said. Evan froze. "That's not negotiable." "It's business," Trent added quickly, eyes avoiding Evan's. "I'll handle operations. You focus on product development." It sounded like partnership, but it was the start of exile. Within a month, Trent had rewritten agreements and charmed new stakeholders. Evan was pushed out temporarily. Lila called it a relief. "He's helping you," she said, sitting on the edge of their bed. "You're not a leader, Evan. You're kind. But kind doesn't survive the world." He closed the drawer quietly, placing the notebook inside. "You're right," he whispered. "Kindness doesn't survive. It evolves." That was the night he stopped explaining himself. The next morning, he kissed her forehead and left early for a meeting that never existed. Lila barely noticed. Trent arrived that afternoon with champagne, claiming he'd saved the company. She didn't know yet. The man they toasted to losing had already begun building the silence that would one day crush them both. Rain never lasted long in Austin, but that afternoon the sky looked bruised. Inside Apex Neural Systems, the glass conference room glowed with blue light and quiet betrayal. Trent paced with a charm that fooled investors but not walls. Evan stood at the far end of the table, laptop open, code scrolling across the screen like evidence of a dying heartbeat. "It's temporary," Trent said smoothly. "They just want clarity and leadership until funding clears." "You mean control," Evan replied. "Semantics." Around them, two venture capitalists in tailored blazers nodded, pretending neutrality. Lila sat near the corner, dressed in beige confidence, pretending she didn't feel the weight of what was happening. Evan slid a folder across the table. His latest patent diagrams, neural language architectures drawn by his own hand. "You can have the product pitch," he said, "but not my code. My name stays on everything." "Of course," Trent said quickly, his smile tight. "We'll protect your interests." The sentence was pure poison wrapped in civility. That night, Evan came home late. The house felt borrowed. Her perfume hung in the air like someone else's life. Lila sat on the couch, scrolling through photos of gala dresses she couldn't afford. "You didn't fight for it," she said. "Trent did." "Trent fought for himself," he answered quietly. "I built something worth stealing, that's all." "And you let him take it." He didn't argue. He went to the desk, wrote a single line in the notebook. Trust dies quietly. Weeks passed. He signed restructuring documents while Lila stood behind him, phone buzzing with Trent's late-night texts. Each paper felt heavier, but inside one paragraph, he inserted a clause only lawyers who truly read would notice. Intellectual property remains under creators' retained ownership, non-transferable without written consent. When he slid the contract across, Trent barely skimmed it. "We good?" Evan nodded once. Better than you think. By August, Evan's name was gone from the website. Lila called it inevitable. He called it necessary. Trent started driving him home from courtesy meetings. Their conversations turned polite, clinical. "You'll land somewhere," Trent said one night. "You're talented, just not built for this level." Evan smiled faintly. "Maybe you're right. But I build things that last longer than names on doors." 2 days later, Lila found a note on the kitchen counter. "Don't wait up." She assumed he was sulking. He was, in truth, setting fire to the bridges behind him, quietly downloading backups of his code, emptying the house of anything sentimental. When Trent arrived with wine that evening, she didn't ask why Evan's toothbrush was gone. She just poured 2 glasses and toasted to new beginnings. Outside, the neighborhood lights flickered against storm clouds. Somewhere downtown, a man with a black notebook closed the lid of his laptop and walked into the rain, disappearing not in defeat, but in design. San Francisco fog rolled over the bay like a slow secret. Evan Carmichael stepped off the overnight bus from Austin with 2 suitcases and a notebook full of losses. He rented a studio above a noodle shop where the walls sweated steam and the ceiling leaked in rhythm with his doubts. He didn't tell a soul where he'd gone. He simply vanished, the way a wounded man hides before he grows claws. Days blurred into caffeine, code, and silence. He rewired his old algorithms by candlelight, his fingers cracked from typing. In the mornings, he jogged along the Embarcadero, watching billion-dollar offices glow with the arrogance of men like Trent. Each sunrise was a vow. "I'll build something they can't steal." It was at a cafe near Market Street that he met Harper Dawson, widow of his late mentor, Dr. Alan Dawson. She recognized the haunted look before he spoke. "Alan used to come home with that same expression," she said softly. "He'd say genius is a lonely bruise." "He taught me everything," Evan replied. "Then let me return the favor. Come to the lab. It's been collecting dust since he died." The lab sat behind a converted warehouse, filled with forgotten prototypes and the ghost of ambition. For 6 months, Harper and Evan turned that space into a furnace. She handled investors discreetly. He built relentlessly, sleeping 3 hours a night. They called the project Vanguard AI, designed to predict cyber intrusions before they occurred. He refused to outsource a single line of code. It wasn't just invention, it was resurrection. When the prototype finally pulsed alive, Harper leaned against the doorway, eyes wet. He'd be proud. Evan didn't look up. "I'm not doing this for pride. I'm doing this to end silence on my terms." Investors from the same conglomerate that had swallowed Trent's company came sniffing around. Within weeks, Vanguard Technologies was acquired for $380 million, with Evan retaining a controlling stake and a seat on the board. He signed the contract in the same pen Trent once gave him as a symbol of partnership. The first thing he bought wasn't a house or a yacht. It was the Rolls-Royce Phantom, sleek and black, an emblem of quiet arrival. He parked it in the underground garage, untouched for days, almost afraid to start it. Then he received the email. "Travis County Court has scheduled your final hearing." He closed his laptop, breathed once, and whispered, "Perfect timing." The night before flying back to Austin, Harper found him staring at the bay. "You've won," she said. "No," he replied. "I've evolved." He slipped the notebook into his coat pocket, the same one that once held failure, and walked toward the skyline that had remade him. The courthouse cafe smelled of espresso and pride. Lila Carmichael sat at a corner table with her mother and Trent, the picture of control, hair immaculate, lipstick sharp enough to cut through gossip. Every few minutes, she checked the glass doors, waiting for Evan to appear again. She wanted to see him trip, to confirm that the Rolls-Royce was a borrowed costume, not reality. "He probably begged someone to lend it," her mother said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "That man could never afford polish." Lila smirked. "He's desperate to save face. Once the decree's signed, he'll fade again." Trent chuckled without humor. Let him enjoy his little show. After today, he's a footnote. But there was unease behind Trent's grin. His phone buzzed with a call from the office, an assistant asking if he'd heard about a new security contract signed by Vanguard Technologies. The name stuck in his chest like a splinter. He ended the call quickly and looked out the window. Evan's lawyer had just walked past, an older man in a charcoal suit carrying 2 sealed envelopes. He handed them to a clerk at the registration desk with quiet authority. "That's his lawyer," Trent muttered. "So?" Lila asked. "So he's not acting broke." Inside the courtroom, Evan sat at his table already, perfectly composed. No tapping, no restlessness, just presence. The black notebook lay near his elbow. He wasn't writing, merely waiting. Every so often he glanced toward the judge's bench as though he'd memorized the rhythm of justice itself. "Mr. Carmichael," his lawyer said under his breath, "everything's in motion." "Good," Evan replied. "Let her have her last laugh before the silence hits." At the back of the room, 2 reporters adjusted their cameras. Divorce between a small-town tech founder and a boutique socialite was gossip, not headline, but the Rolls-Royce had changed that. Lila spotted them and whispered, "Make sure they see you smile," to Trent. She stood, adjusting her jacket, walking toward Evan's table with the confidence of a queen addressing a servant. "Nice car," she said lightly. "Does it come with a return policy?" He looked up, expression even. "No. I tend to keep what's mine." The words landed like a riddle. Lila blinked, masking discomfort with a laugh. "Cute line. Pity it's too late to impress anyone." "You're right," he said, eyes steady. "It's not meant to impress, it's meant to remind." She didn't understand, not yet. But when his lawyer passed the clerk another form, one sealed with the golden crest of the state court, something inside her shifted. Trent leaned close, whispering, "Why's his attorney smiling?" Lila straightened, pretending not to hear. "Because he's losing gracefully." But her voice betrayed her. Outside the windows, the Rolls-Royce waited under the glare of the Texas sun, still gleaming, still patient, like the quiet end of a long war. Evan's calm unnerved everyone, and the whisper spreading through the room carried the one sentence no one expected. "That's not a rented car." The hearing hadn't even begun, and already something invisible had turned against her. The courthouse hallway felt colder after recess. Lila reapplied her lipstick with trembling precision, pretending control. Reporters hovered like vultures behind glass doors. Her mother whispered prayers that sounded more like curses, while Trent paced by the water cooler, tapping his phone until the screen dimmed. He'd just checked Vanguard Technologies' filings again. Numbers that shouldn't exist. Contracts that shouldn't bear Evan's name. Yet there it was. Evan Carmichael, CTO and majority shareholder. He swallowed hard. "Why do you keep checking that site?" Lila snapped. "Because I don't like surprises," Trent muttered. When they walked back inside, Evan was already seated. Calm. His lawyer whispered something, and Evan gave a small nod, the kind that said everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Lila caught the gesture and forced a laugh she didn't feel. "He's just trying to look confident," she said to Trent. "It's an act." "Then why does it feel like the room belongs to him?" The judge hadn't returned yet, but the energy had shifted. Evan sat there like he'd already heard the verdict and it favored him. The black notebook rested near his hand, a familiar relic from a past life, and his pen turned slowly between his fingers. A bailiff entered, handing something to Evan's lawyer, a sealed envelope stamped with Vanguard's insignia. Lila leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "What's that?" "Standard procedure," Trent said, though his voice cracked. The lawyer stood briefly to file the envelope with the clerk. "Supplemental disclosure, Your Honor," he announced. The judge nodded without looking up. Evan's calm was too deliberate. It wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. He didn't glance at Lila, didn't speak to Trent. He only adjusted his cufflinks, silver catching the fluorescent light. For a man once labeled broke, everything about him now radiated money, and power earned, not borrowed. Trent's phone buzzed again. He turned slightly, checking it under the table. Another notification. Vanguard acquires Avery Tech's parent company. He froze. Blood drained from his face. Avery Tech, the very firm his investors had sold to a larger group months earlier. Vanguard now controlled the entire chain. Evan didn't just win, he owned him. "Trent?" Lila whispered. "You look sick." "We need to talk," he said quietly. "About what?" "About the man you called a loser." Before she could respond, the courtroom doors opened. The judge returned. Reporters shuffled closer, cameras ready. Evan closed his notebook gently, placing it atop the table like a period ending a sentence. He finally looked up at Lila and Trent, gaze calm, mercilessly steady. "I warned you," he said softly. "Never underestimate long-term assets." Lila's breath caught. Trent's hand slipped from hers. The judge cleared his throat. "Let's proceed with final disclosures." As the first pages turned and the murmurs began, Lila realized what terrified her wasn't his wealth. It was that he'd known this moment was coming all along. The courtroom noises faded into a distant hum as Evan's mind slipped backward through time, to the nights when his revenge first began to take shape. It started 6 months earlier, the night he realized Trent and Lila had taken everything. Evan sat alone in his small Austin office, rain streaking the window, a contract glowing on the screen. Trent had drafted it himself, neat, confident, and filled with hidden traps. But Evan read slowly, word by word, until he found his way in. One small paragraph about transferring intellectual property. That was where he planted his revenge. All proprietary software and related code shall remain under the creator's personal ownership and cannot be transferred without written consent. He printed it, signed, slid it across the table. "Final draft," he'd said. Trent barely skimmed it before signing. One careless stroke of ink sealed his own downfall. Months later, San Francisco. Evan stood in Harper Dawson's quiet lab, the city's fog pressing against the glass. The servers hummed as if aware they were building something that would change everything. Harper watched him work, sometimes bringing food he forgot to eat. "You don't talk about her," she said one night. "Some debts pay themselves," he answered. When Vanguard AI came alive, its data streams glowing across the monitors, Harper clapped once and whispered, "You did it." "Not yet," he said. "It's only real when they see my name again." And they did. The conglomerate that owned Trent's company bought Vanguard for hundreds of millions. Evan signed the deal with silent satisfaction. Power had circled back. Back in Austin, his attorney prepared 2 envelopes, one for financial disclosure, another simply labeled personal. "You sure you want to file the second one?" the lawyer asked. Evan shook his head. "Not yet. Timing decides everything." He glanced at the hospital paperwork resting nearby, noting the small error under his son's name, blood type O positive. His own was B. He said nothing, just folded the paper neatly and tucked it inside his black notebook. The audience wouldn't know it yet, but that single folded page would later detonate the courtroom. He spent the following weeks watching silence work for him. His wealth papers were filed, his reputation reborn. He didn't need to call Lila or Trent. Success would send the message louder than any words. Now, sitting in court again, he ran a finger over the edge of that notebook. On the first page, one line stared back. "People change when money leaves the room." Below it, another he'd written recently. "And truth shows up when greed gets loud." Across the aisle, Lila whispered something to Trent, her smile brittle. Evan didn't react. The judge adjusted his glasses. The next words would decide whether patience or pride had truly won. The judge adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. The murmur in the courtroom softened. Everyone leaned forward, sensing the moment of finality approaching. The case was nearly done. Lila Carmichael straightened her jacket, her mother held her purse tight, and Trent exhaled like a man expecting a clean escape. "Judge, before I issue the final decree, Are there any remaining financial matters or requests from counsel? Lila's lawyer stood confidently. Lila's lawyer. Yes, Your Honor. Given that Mrs. Carmichael has maintained primary custody of their 3 children for the past 6 months, she requests full child support and coverage of their private school tuition and health care. Lila sat taller, eyes flicking toward the reporters. There it was, the final twist of the knife. Her victory was complete. Across the aisle, Evan didn't flinch. He just adjusted his cufflinks. His lawyer rose slowly, voice calm enough to cut through noise. Evan's lawyer. Your Honor, before any discussion of child support proceeds, my client respectfully requests a paternity test for all 3 minors. Silence. For a full 3 seconds, no one moved. The words seemed to echo against the marble walls. Then a wave of murmurs rippled through the courtroom like static. Judge, I beg your pardon? Evan's lawyer. We are requesting formal court-ordered DNA testing to confirm biological paternity before any support obligations are assigned. Lila's mouth fell open. Her lawyer froze. Trent turned his head sharply toward her, eyes widening in confusion. Lila. What? Judge. Mrs. Carmichael remained seated. Lila. He's lying. He's trying to embarrass me in front of everyone. Evan's lawyer. We have reason to believe the minors may not be Mr. Carmichael's biological children. There are inconsistencies in medical records, including blood type documentation. Evan finally looked at her, calm, cold. Evan, you said I was too trusting, Lila. You were right. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She turned to her lawyer, but he had already gone pale. Lila's lawyer. Your Honor, this is unsubstantiated. Judge. Quiet. The motion is noted. The judge flipped through the file Evan's lawyer handed him, scanning the hospital paperwork inside. The silence that followed was so sharp it could have been broken by a whisper. Judge. The motion for paternity testing is granted. All financial rulings, including child support, are suspended until results are confirmed. The court will reconvene upon receipt of those results. The gavel fell once. Loud. Final. Lila slumped into her chair, lips trembling, eyes darting to Trent. You told me they'd never find out, she whispered. Trent's face drained. What did you just say? Reporters erupted. Cameras flashed. The judge called for order, but chaos had already arrived. Evan rose slowly, collected his notebook, and walked past them without a glance. He didn't look angry. He looked finished. At the doorway, he stopped just long enough for one quiet sentence. Truth doesn't humiliate people, Lila. Lies do. Then he left, the doors closing behind him like a verdict of their own. The news broke before the courthouse could control it. By morning, every major local network had the same headline. Billionaire tech founder demands DNA test for his 3 children during divorce hearing. Reporters camped outside the Travis County Courthouse. Paparazzi lenses glinted under the Texas sun, ready to devour every expression. Lila arrived first, wrapped in a black coat and sunglasses. The same woman who once thrived on attention now flinched from it. Her mother whispered frantic prayers. Trent trailed behind her, jaw tight, his phone buzzing nonstop with investor calls he refused to answer. He hadn't slept. He knew something was coming. When Evan entered, the noise outside softened like the air itself respected him. He wore the same navy suit, unhurried, unreadable. The clerk stepped forward with a sealed envelope stamped state-approved DNA results. The judge entered and took his seat. Judge, let's proceed. Counsel, you've both reviewed the lab verification? Evan's lawyer. Yes, Your Honor. Results are certified and filed. Lila's lawyer. For the record, my client disputes the relevance. Judge. Noted. The court recognizes the document as official evidence. The judge adjusted his glasses, reading silently. Every second stretched, then his pen tapped the bench. Judge. The results show 0 probability that Mr. Carmichael is the biological father of any of the 3 minors. Gasps broke the silence. Lila's lipstick cracked as her mouth fell open. Lila, no, that can't be right. Judge, Mrs. Carmichael, sit down. Evan's lawyer, Your Honor, with these findings, we move to dismiss all claims for child support and custody. Judge, granted. Reporters scribbled frantically. Trent's phone buzzed. Investors wanted answers he didn't have. Judge, the court has also reviewed both financial disclosures. Mr. Carmichael's current holdings were acquired after the divorce filing and are classified as separate property. No spousal support is awarded. Mrs. Carmichael retains only assets already titled in her name. Lila's voice cracked. Lila, he's leaving me with nothing? Judge, that's what the law allows. He signed the last page, the scratch of the pen louder than any gavel. Judge, the marriage of Evan Carmichael and Lila Carmichael is hereby dissolved effective immediately. The gavel struck once, hard, final. Lila's mother began to cry quietly. Trent rose, moving toward the exit, but Evan's presence froze him mid-step. Lila's eyes followed Evan across the courtroom, desperate for even a glance of mercy. He finally looked at her. Evan, you wanted to watch me crawl. Now you've seen me stand. He walked out as flashes exploded from the press. Outside, a reporter's voice pierced the crowd. Reporter, Mr. Carmichael, what's your reaction to the verdict? Evan, it's not a verdict, he said calmly. It's clarity. He stepped into the Rolls-Royce, the door closing with the hush of completion. Inside, he exhaled once. No triumph, just peace. Behind him, the courthouse doors burst open. Lila stumbled out, hair disheveled, face pale beneath the makeup she once wore for power.